Simona is 8 years old. Her parents take her on a trip to a forest area, particularly to a house within the forest. They go there, it's a winter night, full of snow, white everywhere, snow falling on the trees, on the floor, on the road, on the houses, on the roof, on snow everywhere. It's a full moon day. The moonlight is actually shimmering all over the place, and it's whitest of the white, as per her words. Just when they were about to enter the forest, a wild bull, the cattle that roams the forest, it crosses the road, and it was a sight to behold. It was a majestic animal. It was just lazily crossing the road, and then they go to the forest, and just one look at the house, which was sheeted with moonlight, she fell in love with the house. Who is Simona, and why is her story important to us and to humankind? My dear listeners of Radioudaan, I'm your babuji janak rajan. You're listening to the latest episode of the Great Indian Monologue. In this episode, I'm going to highlight the life of a beautiful human being, a person who broke the human-animal barrier for the first ever time in the recorded history, at least the Western history. And what was her life message to us? Simona Kosak was her full name. She was a Polish girl. She was born in Poland in a family of artists. Her father and mother were artists, and they loved nature. They took her to this forested house with the idea of living there and doing their artwork. Young Simona, she loved the forest very much and all the animals that were roaming there. Very soon, she actually befriended a bunch of deer, a wild boar, and a female lynx. Lynx is kind of a wild cat in the tiger family. She befriended, so many animals, and she started feeding them. Deers, she was feeding them regularly, and a lot of animals started visiting her place. And soon, when she grew up in that kind of an ambience where the house didn't have any running water and electricity, it was absolutely a primal house in the middle of an ancient forest, an endangered forest in Poland. Poland is an a developed nation, which actually suffered the wrath of World War II because of Nazi occupation, and then it reinvented or rebuilt itself beautifully. And she was born in the 1950s in Poland, and her childhood and teenage was spent well in the forest area, and she grew up into a beautiful woman, and she started sharing that accommodation with a partner who was into research and so many other things. And one day he brought a baby of a wild boar. A wild boar is a really big animal. He brought a baby, and he started tending to the baby in that house. And whenever he had to go away, he requested Simona to take care of the baby. And soon the wild boar became a pet for both of them, and it started occupying the space, and it started sleeping in the bed too. I had seen a beautiful poignant photograph where the wild boar is sleeping on the bed, and this lady Simona, she's sleeping on the floor. Her love for wilderness, wild animals, and nature was so great. She could do that effortlessly. And very soon they started attending to sick animals in the neighborhood, a doe here and a deer there, and so on. They would nurse them back to health, and then let them into the forest. Life was beautiful. She grew into an ecologist, a scientist ecologist, though she loved to call herself a zoo psychiatrist. And she became a highly spoken about and highly respected scientist, and she started to do activism too, in the sense the forest where she was living was an ancient one, and any attempt to change the ecosystem, she would be the first one to raise the voice against that. She actually loved to share a lot of personal interactions with animals, and a few things actually stood out for me, which I would love to share with you. In one of the cases, she was about to venture into the forest from her house, And then, suddenly a bunch of deer, they appear in front of her and they started barking at her frantically as if advising her, "Mom, please don't go into the forest." She actually fed them when they were young using bottled milk, and she nursed them to health, and so they remember, and they sense some kind of a danger because their body language, it was just communicating that hair standing all over the body and fear in the eyes, frightened eyes, and the bark also conveyed some kind of a danger. She didn't know what it was, and when she attempted to go into the forest, they kind of stopped her by repeatedly barking at her and moving their body vigorously to show her, to convey to her that please don't go there is a danger, which animals normally do only to their own kith and kin, only to their own animals, but not to human beings. Never heard of before, and never recorded also. She decided to go into the forest anyway to check what was causing the trouble, and she could guess that it could be a carnivore animal, a predatory animal, which would be a great danger for the deers. So soon into the forest, she found the droppings of some animal. She tested them and she realized that the dropping was fresh, and she also identified that it was a lynx. A lynx is a kind of wild cat, the big cat like a tiger, which could kill deers and eat them. So because of this predatory species, the deers could sense, either they would have seen or they would have actually sensed the arrival of this predatory species into the forest, and they wanted to protect her from the danger, and that is why they were barking at her. She says, this could probably be the first ever time the wall between the animals and the humans were broken. If you imagine that the animals and us, the humans, are separated by a glass wall, they could never be able to communicate to us, however hard they try and however hard we try. But this incident, it broke through the wall, and it also convinced her that the deers accepted her as part of their clan. This was not a solitary incident. This was not just a standalone incident. In another case, some group of scientists, they wanted to monitor the movement of wolves in the forest area where she lived. So they wanted to radio collar a few animals. Radio collar is a device which could be placed on the neck of an animal, which would emit a signal which could be tracked. So the idea was to track the movement of these wolves into the forest, which area they frequent, which area they avoid, how much time they spend, and so on. So they could do some meaningful research out of it. But in order to do that, they had to capture some wolves to fix the radio collar on them. So to capture the wolves, they started placing traps inside the forest. A heavy metal device. If an animal steps onto it, its legs will be caught. Soon after they placed one such trap, Simona she ventured out and she spotted the trap and she took it back to her home. In the sense, as an act of rebellion. My dear reader, my dear listener, she didn't approve the act of the scientists with the fact that if the animal's leg is caught in that metal trap, it could harm the foot irrevocably, and the animal may never be able to walk again because it's a heavy metal clamp. So as an act of protest, she removed that trap and kept it in her home. And after some time, the scientists, they came to pick up some wolves with the idea that they would have been trapped into the trap by now, but then they couldn't even find the metal trap. So they searched around and they finally came to know that she had removed it from the place they placed it. So they went to her and they argued with her, but she confronted with solid facts that the risk of the foot injury to the animals and how the animals would be rendered ineffective ever after they step on the trap. So they took her to the court and she argued in the court and she won the case. And you won't believe me, the day after she removed the trap, a bunch of wolves visited her place. Wolves never ever enter human territory, and that too in a bunch. And in this case, they all entered her house and they howled in a kind of gratitude or signal of thank you. This was yet another incident where we could see how the animals accepted her as part of the group, as maybe a savior. And there are many such anecdotal evidences to point to that fact that she broke through the glass wall between the animals and humans in terms of interaction. Right? She went on to do lot of wonderful stuff. She was even called a witch because of her, apparently, supernatural powers in interacting with the animals and birds and all kind of insects. And she became a director of some big organization, and she passed away when she was 64 years old. But her biggest contribution, as I see, is a warning device that warns the impending danger of an approaching train to the wild animals which may cross the railway lines and in the process get hit and get killed. She actually observed the signaling pattern of animals when they are in distress. So she advised a bunch of scientists to record the voices of animals in distress in a particular order, like deer barking and then some other animals howling. And collectively, it basically conveyed to the animal kingdom that there is an impending danger in that particular area, so please avoid that area. This device, this audio sequence was recorded and played in a railway track section in a forest area. And very soon, the researchers and the forest department found out that the number of accidents or the roadkills, where animals got hit by speeding trains, drastically reduced. So this device was widely adopted in many such areas where trains and highways crisscross the forests of Poland, and it was a huge success. And she was the inventor of the idea behind that device. And right through, she lived only in that forest, and she rarely ventured out, and she was the focal point of the conservation of nature, and the forest survived and thrived just because of her. And later on, some documentaries were made about her, and you could actually Google Simona Kossak, SIMONA Simona Kossak, to find out more about her. And I have been trying to get in touch with some people in Poland with the idea of getting to know more about this device, which helped preventing elephants and other big animals getting killed on the railway tracks and highways, with the idea that the same thing could be replicated here in India. I have also pitched it to some friends of mine who have access to the forest department, but so far the response from the forest department is not so enthusiastic. But I'm sure one day I will be able to get more information which would help me to convince the people who are in the decision making chairs to get this device and implement it in at least some stretches and to do a pilot. So my dear listeners, the earth that we live on, the 7.2 billion people or 8 billion people, whatever count we keep hearing, is only about us, and it has many more billions of multiple organisms apart from us. And our earth, the beautiful place, is meant for all of them. And I would love to remind my listeners and their friends and their relatives and the whole of humanity that let us stop thinking only about us and let us start thinking about the whole life form which keeps our earth alive. So if we are sensitive to the ecosystem, if we are sensitive to the animals who cohabitate with us on this great blue planet, only then the ecological balance will be maintained. And to do that, we have to move away from mindless consumerism, which is destructing nature by miles and miles every single minute. So my dear listeners of radioudaan, this is your RJ babuji Janak Rajan. You just listened to a beautiful episode of humanity, about what it means to live a fuller life, inclusive of all the life forms around us, not just human beings. And I hope it motivates you to think of doing something in this line to help Earth heal faster from the scars we keep making and the wounds we keep creating every living moment. Stay blessed, my dear listeners. I'll talk to you in yet another episode of The Great Indian Monologue with another interesting story, probably about an Indian counterpart of Simona Kossak. He was known popularly as the Elephant Doctor in the Nilgiris. Till then, bye-bye from Babuji. I'll talk to you soon.